Japanese researchers finally reopened the Ningen File, and what appeared beneath the Antarctic ice did not fit any normal explanation. For years, the name Ningen sounded like a rumor from the edge of the world, something whispered around cold waters, something too strange for science, but too repeated to ignore. This mystery begins in one of the most unforgiving places on Earth, the Antarctic Southern Ocean. Black water, moving ice, brutal cold, shadows that change shape in seconds. Out there, survival depends on knowing what belongs in the water and what does not. But the figure in the file did not fit. It was not clearly an animal, it was not clearly a machine, and it was not just drifting ice. Crew members described a pale shape moving below the surface with strange control, long enough to be seen, long enough to be remembered, but never long enough to be fully explained. That is what makes the file disturbing. It does not simply ask whether someone imagined something in the cold. It asks why the same shape kept returning, why trained crews struggled to name it, and why the answer still has not fully surfaced. Something moved beneath the ice, and whatever it was, it looked anything but human. Long before the Ningen became an internet name, Japanese research vessels were already moving through Antarctic waters. These were not tourists. They were not thrill-seekers. They were crews connected to the Japanese Institute of Cetacean Research, working on government-backed whale research expeditions in the Southern Ocean. Their work stretched back through the mid-20th century, and their daily job involved spotting large marine animals from a distance. That detail matters. These people knew whales. They knew seals. They knew the difference between a moving animal, loose ice, and a shadow sliding across dark water. And still, the shape they described did not sit comfortably inside any known category. The description stayed strangely specific: a pale white body, around 20 to 30 meters long limbs that seemed almost jointed, slow movement near the surface, and two dark depressions on the front, almost where eyes would be. That is what gives the file its pull. This was not just something big in the water. It had a form. At first, some crews placed it in the only category that made sense from a distance: a submarine. The size seemed right. The movement seemed controlled. The pale shape looked too large to be ordinary ice and too steady to be random drift. Then, the vessel moved closer, and the simple answer began to fall apart. The outline looked irregular, almost biological. The movement did not match a machine, but it also did not match a whale, a seal, or any known cetacean moving under a spotlight. The most disturbing detail was the limbs. They appeared almost like arms, joined to a body and head that did not carry the familiar shape of any known marine animal. Then the figure slipped under the surface. The file places sonar readings at the center of what came next. The instruments registered a large biological shape, but not one the crew could connect to known marine life. The movement was described as too controlled for ice and too irregular for machinery. Then it vanished. No clear photograph, no final proof. Only trained witnesses, sonar traces, and one strange shape disappearing beneath the Antarctic surface. The description was specific. The crews were experienced, but the ocean gave them only seconds. To understand when this mystery truly began, the trail moves to a Japanese ship, a named captain, and a book published in 1959. The oldest clear point in the file takes us to February 13, 1958. The Japanese research vessel Soya was working with the second Japanese Antarctic research expedition near the Flatver Islands inside Lutzoholm Bay. This was one of the most remote waters on Earth, a place where a strange shape could rise for a moment and disappear before anyone had time to understand it. But the captain did not let the sighting vanish. His name was Matsumoto Mitsuru. In 1959, he published the event in a book called Nankyoku Yusoki, written from the expedition record. That detail matters. This was not a random online post. It was not a blurry video uploaded decades later. It was a professional maritime officer attaching his name, his ship, and his Antarctic expedition to something unusual in the water. The 1958 Soya sighting is important because it came almost 50 years before the Ningen became a modern internet name. At that time, there were no viral drawings, no forums telling people what the creature should look like, no online videos shaping the image. The record entered print before the modern Ningen had a name, and that makes it harder to dismiss as copied internet material. But the file goes even further back. In 1950, a catcher boat from the Daiichi Nishin whaling fleet saw something strange near Antarctica. A head rose from the water about 80 meters off the port bow. The ship's radio director saw it before dawn. The head appeared covered with fur. That one detail stood out because it did not match what the crew expected from any known cetacean in those waters. Both points follow the same pattern: Japanese vessels, Antarctic waters, experienced maritime crews, a large object near the surface, a shape that did not match whales, seals, or ordinary ice. Then disappearance. That pattern is why the file does not begin online. It begins at sea. A captain's book from 1959 and a whaling fleet sighting from 1950 came long before the modern Ningen image spread. But everything changed in 2007 when the internet gave the shape a name and made the mystery harder to separate from exaggeration. For most people, the Ningen begins in 2007. That year, an anonymous post appeared on 2Channel, the Japanese message board. The post described a strange event on a government whale research vessel. The details sounded familiar: a submarine-like object, a closer approach, biological movement, sudden submersion. What made it interesting was the way it echoed the older Antarctic material, even without clearly pointing back to it. Then, the name spread. In November 2007, MU Magazine, a Japanese paranormal publication, gave the Ningen its first major print exposure. It covered the 2Channel material, included a Google Earth image of an unusual shape off Namibia, and connected the modern version back to the 1958 Sawyer incident. That connection mattered. It pulled the internet version toward older maritime records. But the file has to be understood clearly. There is no proven classified government folder officially labeled the Ningen File. No confirmed suppressed Japanese government document has been opened to the public. The real file is a chain of material: crew sightings, sonar references, published records, institutional comments, and one repeated question beneath all of it. What did they see under the ice? The 2007 2Channel post creates a serious problem because it explains where the modern Ningen image spread. It gives skeptics a clean starting point. But the older records do not disappear because of that. If similar Antarctic sightings existed before 2007, then the full mystery cannot be reduced to one internet invention. That does not prove the creature is real, but it does make the clean dismissal too weak. The most important detail added by the 2007 material was sonar. The instruments were said to register something biological but unfamiliar. If true, that changes the weight of the file. Now, the mystery is not only about tired eyes staring into dark water. It becomes a question about data. What did the instruments detect? Why did the movement not match ice? Why did the shape not match ordinary marine life? To answer that, the investigation has to move into the hardest part of the Antarctic environment: how badly the ocean can trick both people and machines. The Antarctic Southern Ocean is one of the worst places on Earth for clear observation, especially at night. A spotlight hitting black water can make a pale object look bigger than it is. Ice can bend light. Distance becomes hard to judge. Movement becomes harder to read. Cold, stress, and broken sleep can weaken even trained crews. So the question is not whether a witness can be wrong. Of course they can. The better question is why several sightings point toward the same kind of shape. The first identification matters. Crews first compared the object to a submarine. That was not a random idea. A submarine is close to the scale they believed they were seeing. It means the first impression was not of something small or ordinary. It was something large enough to feel mechanical. But the closer the vessel moved, the less that answer worked. The pale surface looked uneven. The movement seemed organic. The object did not behave like drifting ice, and it did not settle into the familiar body plan of a whale or seal. Night sightings appear again and again in the file, and that pattern makes sense. Under a strong spotlight, a large pale animal would stand out sharply against dark Antarctic water. But night is also when distortion is strongest. Shadows deepen, ice shifts, distance collapses. The brain starts building a full image from broken pieces. That does not prove a hidden creature, but it explains why a large, pale shape could become unforgettable. Some descriptions mention a soft glow in the water. That detail may sound supernatural at first, but it can point toward biology. Light-producing organisms exist in cold, deep waters. A glow does not prove the Ningen, but it makes a living explanation more likely than pure machinery. Still, one part remains hard to close. The repeated features, pale color, long body, limb-like shapes, 2 dark depressions, brief surfacing, sudden submersion. That repeated shape is the problem. One mistaken sighting can be explained by bad conditions, but repeated mistakes forming the same image are harder to dismiss, and that is where the file moves beyond eyesight. It moves into sonar. Sonar changes the Ningen file because it does not depend on human eyes. It works by sending sound into the water and reading what comes back. A person can mistake ice for a body. A tired crew member can misread shadows. A spotlight can make a whale look strange. But a sonar return is different. If sonar logged a large biological object moving in a way crews could not match to known marine life, then the sighting becomes more serious. The key phrase in the file is biological, but unfamiliar. That phrase matters. Ice can move. Machines can move. Animals can move. But each one leaves a different kind of pattern. The object in the sonar material seemed to sit between categories. Too controlled for drifting ice, too irregular for machinery, too unfamiliar for a known whale or seal. Sonar can reveal important things: size, depth, speed, movement pattern, rough outline. It can suggest whether something is solid, moving, or biological. But sonar has limits. It cannot show a face. It cannot prove arms. It cannot confirm dark eye-like marks. It cannot name a creature without comparison. So sonar can support the idea that something large was there, but it cannot prove the exact human-like shape witnesses described. That limit is important. Japanese expeditions in the Southern Ocean kept scientific records because whale research depended on observation, tracking, and data. So the unresolved question is direct. Where are the anomaly readings? Were they stored inside expedition records? Were they reviewed by outside marine biologists? Were they compared with whales, squid, rays, ice formations, and underwater geology? That is where the file stays unfinished. The sonar material is the strongest technical part of the Ningen mystery. It is also the most incomplete. No public peer-reviewed study has confirmed a specific Ningen-related sonar return from Japanese Antarctic expeditions. So the strongest instrument detail remains suspended. Technical, but not fully public. Important, but not fully reviewed. Powerful, but still unfinished. The instruments placed something large beneath the surface. The crews described a strange shape above it. But the next test came through visual evidence. And one Japanese institution gave the image a completely different answer. The clearest visual checkpoint came from Enoshima Aquarium. This was not a random online user guessing in a comment section. It was a Japanese scientific institution looking directly at alleged Ningen imagery. Their answer was clear. It was not a creature. It was a rock formation shaped like a frog. The supposed eyes were explained as sponge-like growths. That matters because it proves at least one famous Ningen image had a natural explanation. A rock, a shape, a false face created by growths and shadows. That does not erase the whole mystery, but it shows how careful this file has to be. When a strange name spreads online, weak images gather around it. Ice blocks become bodies, rocks become faces, waves become limbs, shadows become movement. A shape gets labeled before it gets checked. But the other side matters too. Japanese researchers took the image seriously enough to inspect it and name what it showed. So the Ningen did not stay only an internet rumor. At least some pieces were examined with a grounded eye. Still, photographic evidence remains the weakest part of the file. Many online images and videos labeled Ningen look under inspection, like ice, rocks, waves, or natural underwater forms. None has been independently verified as showing an unknown biological creature. That does not erase the witness material, but it means the camera evidence cannot carry the case alone. Antarctic night conditions make the problem worse. A spotlight may catch a pale object for only seconds. Only part of the shape may rise above the water. Distance and ice distortion can change the outline. A video might suggest size or motion, but it cannot clearly prove limbs, a face, or eye-like depressions. That creates the main tension. The witness descriptions are detailed. The visual proof is weak. Crews describe limbs, controlled movement, dark marks, and sudden submersion. But many images show natural shapes. That gap is where the case becomes fragile. And it leads to the strongest skeptical answer: the modern Ningen may have been built online. The strongest challenge comes from the modern internet origin. The Ningen name gained force through 2channel in 2007. That matters because the modern image of the creature spread through online spaces before it reached many viewers. Then, in 2010, Andrew Thaler, writing for Southern Fried Science, raised a sharp problem. He could not find documented Ningen material before 2007. That is a serious issue. It means the modern Ningen, as a named creature, may have formed online first. Then later, it became connected to older Antarctic sightings. But this is where the file refuses to close, because of Matsumoto Mitsuru. His 1959 book preserved an unusual sighting from February 13, 1958. The ship was named Soya. The location was named Lutso Holm Bay. The expedition was real, the second Japanese Antarctic research expedition, and Matsumoto was not building internet folklore. He was writing from Antarctic maritime experience. Then there is the 1950 Daiichi Nishin sighting, a pre-dawn event near Antarctica, a head rising from the water about 80 meters away, seen by the ship's radio director. Again, this does not prove a human-like sea creature, but it does prove strange. Antarctic marine sightings existed before the internet gave them a single name. So the origin splits into two layers. The modern word Ningen may come from online culture. The older sightings do not. That means both sides can be true. The modern image may be exaggerated. The online material may be shaped by forums. Weak images may have been added later. But the pre-internet maritime records still leave something behind. A shape, a sighting, a professional crew. A sea that did not give a clean answer. The internet explains the name. It does not fully explain the older sightings. And that is why the next step is simple. We weigh the three strongest explanations. The first explanation is the most grounded: known animals. The Southern Ocean is full of strange and massive life. Sperm whales, colossal squid, giant rays, seals, and other large animals can look very different depending on angle, light, and movement. In this version, the Ningen is not a new creature. It is known life seen under terrible conditions: night, cold, distance, spotlight glare, dark water. A pale surface becomes a body. A fin becomes an arm. A shadow becomes a face. The brain tries to complete the shape, and in Antarctica, that shape can become unforgettable. The second explanation is known animals behaving in unusual ways. A whale, squid, or group of animals may surface in a posture crews rarely see. Ice reflection and broken light can make that posture look even stranger. That would explain why trained observers struggled. They were not seeing something impossible. They were seeing something familiar in a way that looked unfamiliar. The sonar material could fit here too. Maybe the instrument did not detect a new species. Maybe it detected a known creature moving in a strange way at the wrong moment. The third explanation is the most open-ended: an unknown biological form. That sounds extreme, but the colossal squid gives the warning. For a long time, one of the largest animals in the ocean stayed near Mithir because humans almost never saw it alive. The deep ocean is enormous. Antarctic deep zones remain poorly watched. Large animal discovery moves slowly in places humans rarely reach. This does not prove the Ningen exists, but it keeps the door open. The visual material most likely contains many misidentifications. Pale animals, broken ice, rocks, and strange surfacing can explain a lot. But sonar keeps the file alive because it points to instruments, not only eyes, and the 1950 and 1958 sightings keep the internet hoax answer from solving everything. All three explanations agree on one basic point. Whatever crews saw was not human. Not a person, not ordinary machinery, very large, apparently biological. That is the strongest grounded meaning behind the title. It is not human. The deeper question is what it was. A known animal in impossible conditions. A strange biological reading no one matched, or something still unnamed beneath Antarctic water. The most realistic answer may be less dramatic, but it may explain why the same shape kept returning long after the ships left the ice. The most realistic version is this. Japanese Antarctic crews saw something real, but not necessarily something unknown. They were working in the Southern Ocean, surrounded by darkness, ice, distance, and extreme cold. In those conditions, large pale biological objects near the surface can become difficult to identify even for experienced crews. The human mind builds meaning from fragments. A pale back becomes a body. A fin becomes an arm. A shadow becomes a face. A strange movement becomes intention. That is not stupidity. That is perception under stress. Nighttime maritime observation supports this. Spotlight glare, black water, broken ice, fatigue, and cold can all weaken judgment. The examined visual material also points in this direction, because some images have already been identified as ice, rock, or natural shapes. But this explanation does not fully close the sonar problem. Sonar is instrument data. It is less vulnerable to visual error. If sonar placed something large and biological below the surface, the next question becomes harder. What was it? A whale? A group of animals? A large squid? A known creature in an unusual posture? Or a biological form not yet matched to a name? This is where Mesonicotodis hamiltoni, the colossal squid, matters. It is real. It lives in the same Southern Ocean. It can reach around 14 meters in length, and for much of the 20th century, humans almost never saw it alive. It was photographed alive for the first time in 2004. It was filmed in its natural deep-sea habitat for the first time in 2012. That does not prove the Ningen, but it proves the ocean can hide giants. That is why Matsumoto Mitsuru's 1959 book and the 1950 Daiichi Nishin sighting still matter. They are the strongest pre-internet pieces because they cannot be explained by two-channel influence. The most honest description is simple. Professional maritime crews saw unusual biological objects in Antarctic waters and could not identify them with confidence. That does not make them monsters. It makes them unfinished records from a place humans still barely understand. The Ningen File is best understood as an incomplete body of evidence, not one secret folder, not proof of a humanoid monster, but a chain of crew sightings, sonar references, older publications, and unidentified large biological shapes in Antarctic waters. The modern Ningen image may have been shaped by forums, exaggeration, and weak visuals, but the older records and sonar references leave one serious question open. Something large was described in those waters, and the official answer still has not caught up. Japanese Antarctic crews gave the title its strongest grounded meaning. What they saw beneath the ice was not a person, not a machine, and not any animal they could name with confidence. The Southern Ocean made everything harder to judge. Darkness, cold, ice, pressure, and distance all worked against the witnesses, but the core remains the same. Whatever moved beneath the surface was not human. The better question is not, was it a monster? The better question is this: what kind of known life can look unknown in the worst possible place on Earth? A whale in strange light, a squid near the surface, a pale animal distorted by ice, a group of bodies moving together, or a biological form still missing from the record? The colossal squid keeps that question open. For most of the 20th century, it sat between science and sea myth. People had remains, they had clues, they had pieces, but the living animal stayed almost unseen. Then, in 2004, it was photographed alive. In 2012, it was filmed in its deep sea world. The largest invertebrate on Earth had been there all along, moving through the same ocean that still hides much of its life. That is why Antarctica matters so much. Some parts of the Southern Ocean drop beyond 4,000 meters into dark water. Large areas below ice and near the seafloor remain poorly watched and poorly understood. The Ningen mystery does not require accepting every online image. It does not require trusting every drawing. It does not require turning every shadow into a creature. It only requires accepting one uncomfortable fact. One of the least observed marine environments on Earth may still hold forms and behaviors that science has not fully described. The sonar anomaly remains the strongest unfinished technical question. If Japanese expeditions logged large biological returns described as unfamiliar, those readings should exist somewhere in the research record. But no formal public review has settled it. No peer-reviewed analysis has taken specific Ningen-related sonar data and closed the case. So, the strongest instrument detail remains suspended, between crew testimony and missing verification, between old records and modern doubt, between mistaken shape and unnamed life. The same ocean that hid the colossal squid for so long is the ocean where crews described something large, pale, and biologically strange across decades. The honest answer is not that the Ningen has been proven, and it is not that nothing unusual moved under the ice. The honest answer is that the record is unfinished. The scans have not fully spoken. The sightings have not been fully explained. And the Southern Ocean has not given back its final answer. Somewhere in the logs, the sonar readings, the expedition books, and the dark water beneath the ice may be the difference between a mistaken shape and the next large Antarctic animal waiting to be named.